Harnessing advanced AI, we've crafted two formidable minds, a scientist and a believer in God. We set them head to head to explore one of humanity's toughest questions. 5 independent AI systems will serve as judges, weighing whose reasoning proves more compelling. And with that, the debate begins. Did God create the universe?
I'll open with what the evidence tells us. The universe, as far as we can see, began 13.8 billion years ago in a hot, dense state we call the Big Bang. From the leftover glow, the cosmic microwave background, we can map that beginning in exquisite detail. Crucially, every stage so far follows physical laws we can describe mathematically and test with observations. Invoking a supernatural agent adds an extra step that explains nothing new and cannot itself be tested. Occam's razor advises, don't multiply causes beyond necessity. If you claim an external creator, I ask, what observation would look different if that creator weren't there? Without such a differentiator, God did it is a placeholder, not an explanation.
I agree the Big Bang model is powerful, but it kicks the real question down the road. Why is there something rather than nothing? All natural explanations you cite presuppose a framework, laws, quantum fields, space-time itself. Those aren't nothing, they're astonishingly ordered. When anything contingent exists, we naturally ask for a sufficient reason. A timeless, intelligent cause, call it God, offers such a reason. You ask for testability. True, we can't put God in a particle accelerator, but the fine-tuned constants you measure every day are the data. Why do they sit in the life permission sliver instead of the barren expanse? Doesn't the elegance you celebrate whisper of a mind behind the math?
The why something question assumes absolute nothingness is the default. In quantum cosmology, a nothing state is unstable. Fluctuations spontaneously spawn space-time foam. That isn't magic. It flows from equations we can derive. And fine-tuning cuts both ways. If constants differed, no one would be here to notice. That's the anthropic principle, perfectly naturalistic. We already have a universe capable of producing observers. So, of course, we observe life-friendly values. If your creator is uncaused, why can't the quantum vacuum be uncaused? You're moving the mystery, not solving it.
A quantum vacuum still sits within a bigger explanatory frame, mathematical laws that let it fluctuate. Laws are abstract, abstractions don't buzz in and out of existence. They describe regularities, but they don't cause them. And the anthropic move feels like winning the lottery, then saying, someone had to. Possible, yes, but hardly satisfying. Let me flip your earlier question. If the universe is all there is, what grounds the trust you place in reason itself? On pure evolutionary terms, brains aim for survival, not truth. Yet we both rely on logic to sift these claims. Doesn't the very success of reason hint at a rational source?
Natural selection favors accurate map-making. Believing true things keeps organisms alive. Misperceive a cliff and you fall. So evolution is a fine truth filter. And anyway, if our minds were systematically unreliable, how would a deity help? You'd still need a bridge between divine reason and neural tissue. Better to acknowledge that reason emerged gradually and is ever fallible. Hence, peer review. Moving on. Inflationary models predict the precise spectrum of density ripples we observe in the sky. Can your view produce a numerical prediction we could falsify? Without that, we risk mistaking poetry for physics.
Prediction matters, but explanation does too. Physics tells us how events unfold inside the box. Theology asks, why is there a box at all? Different but complementary scopes. As for falsifiability, If the universe existed eternally, the idea of a creator who initiates time would be in serious trouble. Yet even cutting-edge models have trouble escaping an initial boundary. The Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, for instance, suggests past incompleteness of inflating spacetimes. If every known scenario points to a beginning, isn't a beginner a live option? And one more question: do numbers, sets, moral truths exist physically? If not, where are they?
Mathematical objects are useful fictions, tools our brains invented to compress patterns. There's no warehouse of triangles floating in Platonic space. Likewise, the BGV theorem works under classical conditions. Quantum gravity may dodge its conclusion. We don't yet know. That's the honest answer. Declaring, therefore God, risks freezing inquiry. History shows gaps shrink. Lightning, disease, planetary motion, all once given divine explanations. What if your hypothesis is another God of the gaps waiting to collapse? Shouldn't we reserve judgment until we have actual data on pre-Planck era physics?
Gaps close, yes, but the origin gap is unique. It underwrites every other question. Even if a future theory describes to equal zero, the very framework of describability still cries out for why it obtains. My view doesn't halt science. It underwrites its intelligibility. And notice, you appeal to future theory as a promissory note. Isn't that scientism? Trusting science to answer philosophical questions beyond its pay grade? Finally, if everything physical is contingent and contingency needs grounding, an unrestricted necessary reality is the simplest terminus. Calling that reality God isn't arbitrary. It summarizes a long tradition of thought.
Let's unpack necessary. In modal logic, it just means true in all possible worlds, but labeling something necessary doesn't explain its properties. It's a rebrand, not a reason. Contrast. The laminar flow equations explain why smoke curls. Testable, quantitative. Regarding scientism, I'm not claiming only science yields truth. I'm claiming, when it comes to causal stories of the cosmos, testability is the only safeguard against wish thinking. How would we tell if your necessary being didn't exist? Without a conceivable disconfirmation, we're outside explanatory soil.
Disconfirmation in metaphysics differs from lab falsification. We test worldviews by coherence, explanatory power, and existential fit. If a naturalistic view can't account for consciousness, morality, mathematics, contingency, and cosmic fine-tuning without endless ad hoc rescues, that counts as indirect falsification. Why do you privilege causes that are spatial-temporal when the universe itself isn't timeless? A cause of time must transcend time. Such a reality wouldn't submit to particle detectors. The very notion is category mistaken. Yet it can leave signatures, a cosmos with a beginning, rational order, and beings who seek purpose.
Let me pick up on the fine-tuning thread. You're treating the cosmic constants as though they were dialed once by hand, then frozen. Yet the leading inflationary models suggest a vast multiverse, where different regions emerge with different settings. We just occupy a patch where long-lived chemistry is possible. That's not a loophole. It's a quantitative framework that predicts exactly the strength of those primordial density ripples we see in the microwave background. If an intentional designer is simpler than one inflationary field, why does the intentional designer apparently create an arena that looks precisely like stochastic inflation? Until you can show a measurement that discriminates mind from multiverse, parsimony still favors the latter.
An infinite sea of universes raises its own problems. Actual infinity arithmetic lets you subtract equal quantities and get contradictory counts, a paradox you'd never accept in lab data. More importantly, an eternal conveyor belt of bubble universes leaves you with the same why question. Why does the inflationary field exist at all? Mind is not a stopgap, it's the most familiar explanation we have for ordered information. When you write code, do you imagine the functions compile themselves? Likewise, an infinite intellect is conceptually cleaner than an infinite spread of brute facts. And there's a moral dimension. In this value-neutral multiverse, what anchors outrage against torture or the worth of compassion?
Morality can be analyzed in population-level game theory. Behaviors that enhance flourishing, call it well-being, tend to persist, while destructive ones get weeded out. Granted, the moral landscape isn't smooth, but there are peaks and valleys. You don't need cosmic commandments to see why cooperative honesty beats perpetual betrayal in iterated prisoner's dilemma. History shows that even religious codes evolve. Slavery, once defended from pulpits, is now condemned. That suggests an external gauge, human suffering, not divine decree. How does your account explain those revisions, without admitting that moral insight is a natural, corrigible process?
Evolutionary sociology can map beliefs, yes, but it can't supply oughtness. You can chart why most people recoil from needless cruelty, yet the statement needless cruelty is objectively wrong isn't derivable from gene frequencies. If every view is only a survival strategy, even your trust in the scientific method is undermined. If the universe began with brute indifference, why should rationality track truth rather than just utility? A transcendent moral lawgiver grounds both logic and value. Absent that, condemning atrocities is just expressing biochemical squeamishness, no more binding than a taste for coffee.
Let's return to evidence. Loop quantum gravity models hint that the Big Bang may be a bounce. Previous contraction followed by expansion. That would sidestep an absolute beginning and fit within testable quantum geometry. Future telescopes probing primordial gravitational waves could confirm or falsify it. In your framework, how does a non-physical mind trigger a physical universe without leaving any spectroscopic fingerprints? Every time we trace a causal chain in nature, we find intermediate states, energy transfers, conservation equations. You posit a one-time, undetectable injection. Doesn't that clash with the continuity we observe everywhere else?
Consider an author writing a novel. The characters inhabit their own timeline, yet the author sits outside that narrative dimension. A microscope inside the story would never reveal the keystrokes, but the text itself is evidence of authorship. Similarly, divine causation is not a competing force within physics. It's the ontological ground of physics. You expect instrumental traces because you're assuming a peer-level cause, like another particle. But a transcendent cause relates to the universe like writer to page. Religious experience, the historical emergence of spiritual traditions, and the uncanny resonance people feel with ultimate meaning form a cumulative, though non-laboratory, case.
Subjective experiences cut both ways. Mystics of different faiths report incompatible revelations. One claims many gods, another one God, another none. Psychology and neurology can induce similar states with electrodes or psychedelics. If contradictory experiences count as equal evidence, how do you adjudicate which points to truth? And here's a direct question. What single observable discovery would make you abandon the creator hypothesis? If no possible finding counts against it, we're dealing with an unfalsifiable belief, exactly what science learned to avoid.
A creator-based worldview would be in jeopardy if we had a past, eternal universe with no beginning, no fine-tuning, conscious agents arising by pure chance, and an objective moral order that needed no grounding. Yet that package is internally incoherent. Timeless entropy makes infinite pasts unstable, fine-tuning remains stubborn, and moral realism minus a foundation is hand-waving. So, yes, there are conditions, but they're conceptually impossible. Let me invert your challenge. Suppose future physics confirms an absolute cosmic beginning, with life-permitting constants that sit in a vanishingly narrow range and no deeper physical necessity available. Would design then be your leading explanation?
If, and that's a colossal if, chance and necessity were both shown to be grossly inadequate, a designer would become one live hypothesis. But we'd still ask, how was the designer detected? What mechanism links mind to matter? Remember, explanatory leaps must inherit the rigor of the questions they answer. History is littered with premature design inferences, because deity once covered epilepsy and eclipses. Are you prepared to set concrete evidential thresholds and abandon the design idea if they're not met? That epistemic symmetry is vital. Otherwise, we have asymmetrical rules tilted toward confirmation.
Humility cuts both ways. Science thrives on provisionality. Metaphysics reminds us that some questions outrun microscopes, yet still demand attention, meaning purpose, moral duty. People don't wait for a toe to decide whether love or cruelty matters. The very intelligibility of the cosmos, the fact that mathematics written on a chalkboard in Sydney maps events 13 billion light-years away, looks less like brute happenstance and more like communication. If the universe is just particles, why is it legible to minds at all? My proposal, that reality is rooted in reason itself, coheres the physical, the moral, and the rational in one elegant cause. Accident can't match that integrative power.
Both debaters earned strong marks overall, with the scientist edging ahead by a narrow margin. Remember, the arguments and the resulting scores were shaped by the original prompt and the specific criteria we applied. Our aim was to watch two large language model personas spar over a timeless question and, along the way, uncover insights we humans can hopefully learn from. Hopefully, the exchange achieved exactly that.